Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Hamilton. This is wonderful. I know you've heard a lot from some of the folks that are involved in Hamilton. I would like to acknowledge that our city manager, Chris Murray, has joined us this afternoon. Chris is going to be part of a round of applause for our city manager. Chris and I and the CEO of the Community Foundation will be chatting with some of you in a workshop in the not-too-distant future. You know, we're here to talk about connections, neighborhood connections, but connections just in general around the people and the institutions that are alive and well and thriving in our communities. And we couldn't be in a better space to make that happen. I've been privileged to be part of this space physically on a number of occasions. I was here in the early stages of its development as a really impressive example of how you can create really strong, healthy housing within a community, and more than just the bricks and mortar and a place to lay one's head on a nightly basis, but a place of energy and activity and support. And so what a great physical space for us to be in. And you know, those connections get us thinking, and even as late as this morning, having conversations about how do we accelerate this kind of approach to building really strong and inclusive communities. So what starts as a tour around a facility can lead to much greater things happening. There's all sorts of neighborhood connections here. You know, Crown Point, I think we sat around, there were about 5 of us. One time I came to a meeting. Now, of course, most of our neighborhoods need much larger spaces to hold their meetings. It was about that energy and the enthusiasm early on. I remember getting the first copy of our neighborhood newspapers. Now we have 4 of them in neighborhoods across this city. I remember those early stage meetings where there was skepticism about whether we could accomplish things together. And now, as Suzanne probably shared with you yesterday, 421 action items, the majority of which are underway. So the enthusiasm and the momentum that's building is wonderful. And then, of course, to run into Jim again, who's you know, always welcome in Hamilton. Jim, you know, Jim left us with a great line when he came to Hamilton the last time, which is, "Why have a meeting when you can have a party?" So, and that's a favorite one of his. I've heard him a bit on YouTube use that before, and we have an R&D policy here at the city of Hamilton, and that's rob and duplicate. So that's the way we work, and Jim, I always give you credit for that. But I took that back to our city manager and said, you know, we have a lot of meetings. Chris was joking with me. He said, your title sounds kind of dry, Director of Corporate Initiatives. I said, well, that's because some days it is pretty dry, lots of meetings. We need more parties. So we decided we'd do that 2 years ago. We started a party in this community called Building Momentum. And we invited all of the folks that are involved in helping our neighborhoods be great places. From CEOs of our institutions to leaders in our neighborhoods to counselors and staff at the city of Hamilton. We came together and had fun. The first year we did it indoors in the dead of winter and set up a space to look like a neighborhood, an outdoor party inside. This year we decided we'd stretch ourselves a little bit and actually have an outside party outside. And we did that at our new stadium. And there was a little bit of sweat. The first year the sweat was we weren't so sure anybody would come to a party that was hosted by our city manager. But then we found out that actually we turned away almost a former mayor because we had sold out. So we rectified that. The former mayor did get in the building. But you know, the first year fear was, would anybody come to a party hosted by the city manager? The answer to that was yes. The second year challenge was that we had a little hitch. We didn't quite finish the stadium on time, and the folks that were building it for us, it wasn't the city's fault. You know, our contractors slow, and we were worried that we wouldn't be able to be in the stadium. But as it turned out, the Building Momentum event became the first event in our stadium's history once the keys were turned over to the city of Hamilton. And the importance of that was not that it was the first event. The importance of that was the way that the team, Suzanne and Ricky and Deb, who you've met along the way, who were really a part of developing this event, we had the community on the field. Not the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who I love, season ticket holder and all the rest. Not the professional athletes. Not the folks that everybody thinks the stadium was built for. We had the people of our community who the stadium was actually built for. It is a community facility owned and operated by the city of Hamilton, and it will have the most community hours of any stadium we've had in our history. And so the fact that the residents of this community, and in particular the folks from the Sherman Hub, were the ones that were on the field for this first public event, was to me symbolic of what we're talking about today. So all the connections are wonderful that are in this room. And, you know, that's a bit of the story of where neighborhoods have taken us. You know, Suzanne is providing such tremendous leadership to Hamilton's Neighborhood Action Strategy, now playing that director level role and continuing the good work in the neighborhoods. But I will tell you that what the neighborhood work is all about at its core is something that's happening and is part of our DNA on a daily basis at the City of Hamilton, and more with all of our community partners and stakeholders. This idea that every organization can think about community development and engaging residents, that every organization in our community can think about assets first and needs and deficiencies second, is something that is becoming part of how we do business. Let me give you a couple of examples as I wrap up a bit of my time here. So we had a challenge in our inner city, in our downtown core. We had a number of folks who were being caught up in an initiative that was about creating a sense and a real sense of safety in our downtown core. Arresting folks who didn't need to be arrested. They needed to have a different way to move forward in their life. And the police chief came to myself and to a few other people and said, I don't feel right about what we're trying to accomplish here at the City of Hamilton. That we are arresting people that need connection to supports, that need somebody to be caring for them, not telling them why they're going to be locked up for the next day, week, month, or year. Paul, how can we build on what we're doing here in the City of Hamilton and treat our downtown a bit like a neighborhood and treat people better? And it was a tough question because I didn't really know exactly where we might go with that. And so, like all things around our neighborhood action strategy, we said, well, what are some of the assets we can bring around the table first? And we did. We brought our paramedics. We brought our social service providers. We brought some folks who had experience in outreach, working with people in our community who sometimes called the street their home, and said, so what would be a way that we could work together around this? And through it, developed an innovative approach called the Social Navigator, which has a paramedic reaching out to individuals who are having constant contact with our police services and offering a bit of a different conversation and offering a different kind of connection. The very fact that two individuals who wear uniforms, our police officers and our paramedics, the conversations that people are willing to have are very, very different. Some of it comes when you're wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a firearm on your side. The conversation is a little bit stilted, I think. But when you're meeting someone who, yes, is wearing a uniform, but actually understands health-related issues to sometimes a very deep level, who understands the community connections and some of the programs and services that are there to help, the conversation starts to flow in a very different direction. What's been interesting about this pilot, which has now been underway for just over 2 years, is that the amount of interaction with police after people have been engaged by a social navigator and, better yet, connected with the right services in our community is a great decrease in the amount of connection. But the stat that I love the best, of the 90 individuals that have been connected and tracked through this program, 100% have said that this approach is meeting their needs. Now, I don't expect it'll stay at 100% through the lifetime of this program, but I can tell you in the first 2 years of startup, that's a pretty good statistic. And it comes from a fact that we didn't create massive pools of new resources, we didn't go after millions of dollars of new funding, and we didn't set up a new bureaucracy. We used the assets we already had in our community, which are plentiful, and made this happen. It's since led to conversations with our hospitals about how we better deal with mental health situations in our community, particularly when the police get involved. And we now not only have a response team that can be there in 24 to 48 hours for residents of our community, we actually have a response team that can respond to a 911 call. Mental health paired with police, it's a movement that's going across our province and across the country, I believe, and it is working. And it's not just about a better outcome in terms of use of resources, it's a better outcome for the individual. And I laughed, our police chief was giddy with telling me stories of this new mental health approach because he said, Paul, did you ever think you'd hear the day where I said to you that we have a civilian that actually has the authority to call off the tactical squad? We now have that in Hamilton. And that's about trust and that's about relationship. And a bit of a piece of the emerging story of our neighborhood work and where it's rooted is with our work with anchor institutions. And I understand fully that the relationship of how we're dealing with residents in our neighborhoods and how the institutions play a role in that can sometimes be a difficult conversation. But we have to start it, and we did. We're trying to suggest to our anchor institutions that listening to what's emerging from our neighborhoods in terms of action items and direction that they would like to go, and matching that with the absolute power and the absolute ability that our anchor institutions have to move the needle, is where we will really find true success as a community. It is not about one side or the other, if you want to use positional bargaining language, ruling the day. It is about interest-based negotiations, if you want to use that language, of people saying, so what is it that you need? What is it that we need? How can we work together to achieve common goals? And believe me, there are lots of common goals that we can achieve together. And so isn't it interesting that we live in a time in Hamilton where our hospital system is talking about the importance of affordable and supported housing in our community, and taking that message to anyone that will listen to them, and ensuring that the Ministry of Health, that accounts for a significant amount of spending in this province and in every province across our country, is aware that housing is really where you start to do preventative work in terms of the health and well-being of our citizens. It's not in finding a better mousetrap of an emergency department or a better clinical response. So isn't it interesting that we're using some of these assets that are new perhaps to their thinking and finding ways to challenge ourselves? It's interesting that those same group of people think community hubs, Karen, is a wonderful opportunity to move forward. And that is about using our community assets. You've had chances to see and hear about how we want to preserve assets in our community for the good use of those neighborhoods. And not always can that be for the first use they were built for. We know that. There isn't a naivety that schools will never close again, or that we won't have to at some point move a program or close a program from a particular facility, but how do we keep public facilities and public assets going for the good of neighborhoods, and not have these lulls where we spend a decade wondering what might happen? Let's plan for that and work for that today. And so some of you might say, well, what does that have to do with what we're here to talk about today? Well, I can tell you that the underpinnings of all of that work came out of sitting down in neighborhoods and asking simple questions. Not simple because we wanted to keep language simple for any particular reasons, but simple questions that led to dramatic actions. We asked one question: how can this neighborhood be a healthier place to live, work, play, and learn? We didn't say, how can it be this kind of place through this lens? Or how can we make sure that we move in this direction with this set of resources? We said, describe what healthier looks like to you, and then let's work on this agenda together. And that's a little bit of the story of Hamilton right now. And my final piece about connections and working together would be, in Hamilton right now, we can't afford not to. Let me take you through the month of May and just a few things that happened on our civic agenda. I'm not talking about the municipality, the corporation, the city of Hamilton. I'm talking about our community. So we have in the month of May, as you've heard, this wonderful community celebration, building momentum, where residents get to take ownership of a community asset and celebrate all the great work that's happening. Also in May, we opened a downtown campus of McMaster University, a place that will not only train the healthcare professionals of the future and do research that will change the face of healthcare for the country, but also a place that will offer service to a community and to an area of our city that hasn't had access to health services in the same volume as it will now. This same month, we saw an investment in urban farming in McQuestion. There's got to be a few people from McQuestion here. Yeah. And this is a group that not only had an idea about urban farming, it's a group that had an idea about urban farming and would not be deterred. Would not be deterred when we actually looked at the official plan, the urban official plan, and realized we couldn't do it. They were not deterred because they said, well, then we'll go change the urban official plan. And they did. And it meant 8 months of different work than we had set out to. And that meant it was a little bit delayed if you look at our critical path. But I don't call that delay, and I don't call that implementation failure. I actually call that doing what we're supposed to be doing together. And then we had this little announcement near the end of May of a $1.2 billion investment in transportation. And if you spend any time at all with our city manager, he will tell you that that investment is not about laying track. It is not about building a few stops for our new LRT in a decade. It's not about just building a new stop for the GO train service that connects us regionally to other communities. This is about a chance to build our community and build our confidence. It has a chance for us to leverage that and do other things in our community, but we can't do it alone. So we need residents, we need neighborhoods, we need civic employees, we need our anchor institutions to come together and say, how are we going to be a community development organization? How are we going to engage differently, do our work differently, and actually achieve the opportunities that are before us? And the best way we start doing about that, obviously, is talking that we have a lot of assets. It's about mobilizing those assets to see our future come for us. So thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit of what we're doing. I look forward to hearing from Milton and Karen, and it's been great to connect with some of you over the lunch hour, and look forward to seeing a few of you in our workshop a little bit later. Thanks very much.